Patch day is here for Marvel Snap, and boy, is it a doozy. Alliances are here now. Our first leagues will be coming to everyone in the not too distant future. There's extra free credits in the shop in perpetuity, and we have some banger card changes to review. Let's go ahead and dive into it, shall we? We kick off the card redesigns with one that I absolutely love for a card that definitely needed some attention, and that is Moon Knight. It will still be a 3/3, but its on reveal will now say discard an even cost card from each player's hand. Seconder notes that improving Moon Knight has been on their whiteboard for a long time, and today they are finally crossing it off. They debated a full rework, but they also acknowledged that there were a lot of people that liked playing this card inside of their discard shells. They wanted to kind of keep that core identity the same. They call out some really awesome deck building considerations to go along with this. The first is that this makes Moon Knight have extra strong synergy with Stature. He's now a clean enabler for that card while guaranteeing that you won't discard her when you activate her with Moon Knight. He also has very direct synergy now with a bunch of the discard payoffs in Marvel Snap, specifically Swarm, Proxima Midnight, and Apocalypse are all cards that you can specifically target with his effect. I think Proxima Midnight is especially exciting for this card because we can now construct our decks in a very deliberate manner, or Proxima Midnight can be one of the few even cost cards, so your Moon Knight can be guaranteed to hit that or discard nothing in your hand while also disrupting your opponent. He'll be especially good into opposing decks that are leaning on big even cost cards. Tagging an opposing Shang-Chi or Red Hulk has a ton of disruptive value with the new text box that Moon Knight brings to the game. All in all, I think this is a stellar change, and it really shows just the incredible designs that the Second Dinner team comes up with. This is far more elegant and interesting than any of the myriad of Moon Knight suggestions I had heard from the Marvel Snap community over the last number of months. I also think it's stellar that this change is finally being rolled out when Proxima Midnight is conveniently going to be inside of Spotlight caches, so that way people who are missing her from their collection will have a nice clean way to pick her up for minimal resources to play with this effectively new card that Moon Knight now is. Our second change today actually doesn't change the text of a card at all, but has a huge functionality change, and that is Shadow King. Specifically, Shadow King will no longer count as raising or lowering a card's power. Instead, it will simply wipe away all buffs and penalties to cards in the lane in which you deploy it. Seconder says the main goal of this change is to hopefully reduce confusion as to what exactly was happening. When you zoom in on a card in Marvel Snap and see all the buffs and penalties applied, effectively what Shadow King was doing previously was it was either applying a buff or a penalty to bring a card back to what its original base was, which made things very murky to really parse what was going on. I like this change a lot from a clarity perspective, and it has another big impact on Shadow King as a card, which is Luke Cage no longer impacts Shadow King. Previously, if you had a Luke Cage in play, Shadow King would not be able to bring down stats on cards like Athena or Angela or Kitty Pryde, and that's no longer going to be the case. If you want to protect your cards from Shadow King wiping their bonuses off of them, you're going to need to have something like Cosmo in their lane to directly stop his on-reveal effect. Honestly, I think this change is obviously a huge power level increase for Shadow King, but I think it's a really good one. I think having Shadow King as like the stopgap that always can make sure cards that are growing up like Athena are kept in check is good. As the metagame game has developed in the last week, moving past Erisham with the addition of Cassandra Nova to the game and Athena decks giving rise, it feels like Shadow King getting this change is going to be a really organic way to give players counterplay into those decks that have been kind of omnipresent of the late. I also love that this change means you can't simply play Shadow King inside of your own scaling deck. It was very common for decks playing their own copies of Athena and Angela to play Shadow King to interact with their opponents while simply leveraging their Luke Cage to make sure that Shadow King is one-sided. Now, Shadow King, similar to other tech cards like Armor and Cosmo, has a real deck building cost and consideration and sequencing choice that you have to make in order to leverage its effect, since it's going to be symmetrical guaranteed when it happens. Second Dinner also notes that this functional change to Shadow King is explicitly applying to Shadow King, and Valkyrie in particular, another card that has some similarities, will still continue to work with Luke Cage as expected, i.e. Luke Cage will prevent Valkyrie from reducing the power of your cards. Our next functional change comes to Uatu. He is now going to once again reveal both the locations to you on turn 1 so long as he is inside of your deck. I don't know if I expect this to move the needle on him necessarily being playable, but he's definitely strictly better than he was before. Perhaps having this information means that it could potentially earn a slot inside of something like Erishim, where putting this 1/2 in your deck is not something you're going to draw nearly as consistently as when you load it up into a 12-card pile. Our last functionality change in this patch comes to Blink, who will now say on reveal, swap the last card you played with a card that costs more from your deck. This is functionally different than her original release text because she's now going to explicitly care about the costs that cards have while they're still in your deck. This matters very explicitly for things like Pixie and Mr. Negative, which swap or adjust the cost of cards before you draw them. Second Dinner notes that they're making this change to add a little bit of consistency to the game. Specifically, they refer to Jane Foster being able to draw cards that cost 0 from your deck, feeling inconsistent alongside Blink, because if Jane cares about the cost that cards have while they're in your deck, they felt that Blink should follow a similar suit. Functionally, I don't know that this change really matters a whole lot. I guess occasionally Blink gets played alongside Pixie, but she almost never gets played alongside Mr. Negative, so I think from a consistency perspective, it makes sense to update this, but I don't know this is really something that's worth experimenting or brewing around, because it just doesn't really make sense to combo it with the cards where this change matters. To head some of you off at the pass, I know there's not a lot of card changes here, but that's also expected if you understand Second Dinner's regular balance cadence. Specifically, these patches get locked in a bit in advance, and they're largely reserved for key functionality changes, like we're seeing with Shadow King, or cards that have their effects changed that require VFX to be changed alongside them. The primary rebalancing tool for adjusting things in the metagame, such as Erishim or Thena directly, are the over-the-air card updates that occur on Thursday. We actually have a set of OTA card changes coming on Thursday, August 1st, which is not far off later this week, with Second Dinner also sharing with us that the tentative cycle for other changes coming up past August 1st is that we'll have another OTA on August 15th, and then our next patch on August 20th as well. In terms of non-card changes, a couple other quick hits for today's patch. The free credits in the shop are being increased from 50 per day to 75 per day, but you'll only be able to claim 25 of them per pop, being able to log in every 8 hours when those free booster rollover is typically happening 3 times per day. We also have alliances live now in today's patch, making it so you can team up with up to 29 other individuals and work together to earn extra rewards. You'll have your own personal bounties as well as alliance-wide goals that can get you individual as well as alliance-wide rewards. Finally, we note that the first public leagues for everybody playing in Marvel Snap are going to be launching on August the 8th, which is a week from this coming Thursday. Leagues are essentially going to be just another avenue of potentially free, or in some cases, paid rewards. The initial league launch for the first one globally will not have any monetization or paid option, although future ones will. Basically, any games you play in Marvel Snap, whether they be Ladder or Conquest or others, will contribute to your league progression, and you will be compared at the end of the league to 30 other similarly placed Marvel Snap players. Whoever had the most progress and success during the league timing window will get rewards based on their final placing. All in all, definitely feels like a solid patch. Major new feature in Alliances rolled out, with another in Leagues coming up soon for more free stuff. The card changes feel really interesting, and I'm excited to brew with Moon Knight especially. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed my breakdown, be sure to snap that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other Marvel Snap game news updates here in the future.